Welcome back, Marty here. In this video, we will create our first application in Visual Basic. It is a simple Hello World application. Remember to leave a like as it helps my channel. Now let's get to it. Open Visual Studio 2019 and click Create a New Project. Type in Visual Basic in the search box. This will give you all available project types we can create with Visual Basic. For this tutorial series, we will use Windows Forms app. Give your application a name. In this case, I will be calling it Hello World, but you can call it essentially anything you really want to. Once you click Create, it will take a moment to generate the project. You will then be presented with a graphical view of your project, which just looks like a window with nothing in it. And you'll have different tabs, etc., containing all of your tools and settings for various parts of your project. On the right, you have the Solution Explorer, which allows you to look at the different components of your application. Under that, you have the Properties menu, which gives you the properties for the current item you have selected. As I have an empty form, it is defaulted to looking at the properties for the form. You'll see as we get further into these tutorials that this section is very useful. On the left is the toolbox, which we will also use a lot later on in this tutorial to add items to our form. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is use the Properties menu to change the text at the top of the window to say Hello World. As you can see, there are a lot of settings here that we could change. Now let's click on the Toolbox tab and drop down the All Windows Forms section. Under here, we will see all the different items that we can add into our application. At the top here are all the options to run the program to test it. You can change the CPU type and whether it is debugging or not. For these tutorials, we'll just leave it as default. Double click on the form to bring up the code editor. You'll see that because we double clicked on the form, it has given us the code that will run as soon as the form has loaded. These menus across the top here allow you to change that. As you can see, we only have the option to code things for the form itself, as we have not yet added in any buttons or other items. There are a lot of different things that we can choose from for the form, as you can see here. At this stage, we'll only be working on the load option for the form. We will create this Hello World application a couple of different ways. The first way we will do is by making a message box pop up. There are two ways to create a message box. The first is to type messagebox.show. The other way is to abbreviate it to MSGbox. They both do the same thing, except when you spell out message box, you get some other options. We'll be using the spelt out version for this. As you can see here, after the dot, you get several options. Right now, we're just going to use show. Alright, so looking at the form, we have nothing on here. But we've added in code, so let's run it and see what happens. Sometimes the first time you run it, it will take a few seconds to load. And we have a message box saying Hello World, so that means our code has worked, which is really good. You'll notice in the right here that Visual Studio shows you some diagnostics of how much of your computer's resources your program is currently using. This can be very handy when troubleshooting your application. When your application is running, you get the option to pause it or stop it up here. Let's stop it now. This is the first way of doing the Hello World application. Let's look at another way, utilizing more tools. Now let's use our toolbox to add in a button to our form. In the Properties section, let's change the button's text. And let's change the name of the button as well. I'm calling it BTN for button and then hello. This makes it easy when writing the code later, so I'll know exactly what it is. Double click on the button. See how the code here is running as if the button has been clicked? Now under here, you'll see there are more items to select from. And again, under this menu are all the options we could use for the button. Okay, let's move this code. This time, we'll use MSGBox. Now let's run our program. Click the button and you now get the Hello World message. Let's do this one more way to show you some of the other tools you have available within Visual Basic. Let's add in a text box from the toolbar. You'll see here that you have the option to change the toolbox to have multiple lines. By default, it will only have one. We'll leave it as the default option for now. If you wanted to, you could change the name of the text box in the Properties menu, as we did for the button. But it is not required, but you can do so if you want. Let's change the code for the button now. Now when the button is pressed, we want it to change the text box text to say Hello World. So type in textbox1.text equals, and then inside brackets and quotations, type in Hello World. Now let's run it and see what it does. And there you go, Hello World is now in the text box. Remember to check out my next video in this series to increase your knowledge of Visual Basic, and leave a like to help out my channel.